I was born in a town very close to the coast, the south of England. It was a very small town. It was completely English, more or less, maybe about 5 people from different cultures living there. So I grew up with not knowing anything about Islam, never even thinking about it. It wasn't part of my life. I never learned about it at school or anything. But I was always interested in seeking kind of knowledge of the unseen. I was always attracted to, I always felt that there's a realm that I need to know about. My family are technically Protestant, but my mother used to take me to church up until the age of about 7, but she stopped because I became too, according to her, I don't remember this, but according to her I became too inspired by the stories of hell that the vicar used to talk about. And I started to kind of tell these kind of horror stories to my friends and scare them, and I was forbidden from seeing them because I was giving my friends nightmares with these kind of narrations of Jahan. I don't know which ones that is. Iraq, actually, recent trip. Don't know if there's any. There's one of me standing. My mother is a garden photographer, and she was commissioned to write 2 or 3 books about different types of gardening. So I've got her books up there on the shelf. I don't know. I have to say she's just a very pure person. My father actually left when I was 2, and I stopped seeing him when I was 5. So I've seen him once since I was 5, and he's not religious. He's definitely, as far as I can see, I mean, he's a writer, but as far as I can see from the things he writes, he's not religious. My family were very into, especially my grandmother as well, very into etiquette and manners. It looked nice on the surface. It looks perfect on the surface. I mean, few people who have come to see my family, they say, you know, what are you doing living in London? Why don't you? The thing is that it looks nice on the surface, but for me there was nothing underneath it. I don't mean to insult my family, but there was nothing underneath it. And for me, I started to feel this frustration about, well, what is this for? We've got a so-called nice life. Our aim in life is to have a nice life, to be polite and do all the right things at the right time. But what's behind it? And there was nothing behind it. And this is why, you know, I felt suffocated. This is from Tehran, because I was living in Tehran for a while, so that's was being sold at the end of my street. Right. That is from the harem of Imam Reza alayhi salam. I've studied for a few weeks in Iran. I was living there for about 6 months. I I do 3 live shows in the evenings, and then one or 2 pre-recorded shows for a series called The Awaited, which is dedicated to talking about Mahdi. The channel has to be careful. Being a specifically Shia channel, we have to be quite careful about being too political. Otherwise we'll get taken off there. So it's already been moved from one satellite. You have to be very, very careful. Especially here, we're not... Okay, actually one of our staff got beaten up, put in hospital, by some Wahhabi. He is going to come back to restore the true Islam. Kumel kujast, mikham, beshun... Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I'm being a bit dictatorial, but...
This is becoming a Farsi speaking channel.
No, you know why? Because he told me to practice my Farsi, I need to speak to him. So.
Yeah.
Just kind of manage
I wanted to leave home when I was 14, and my mum kind of, had to persuade me. Oh no, I was 16. I wanted to leave home, and she sort of had to persuade me. Look, you won't be able to do your A levels if you leave home. I was just desperate to just get out and live my own life. So, right, I'll put this in the kitchen. Moving into my university years, coming to London, moving to Ladbroke Grove, which is supposed to be kind of a fashionable area, hanging around with people who want to be actors and models and artists and everything. That, again, was all about, and I was kind of, by that time I was 19, 20. That, again, is all about the image. It's all about sort of posing. And to me, I just felt, again, the issue of being a human being is missing from this. It might sound strange to people, but it was a very painful time. I mean, I call it like an existential hell. So you're sort of, it's like being in the middle of a party with all the music blaring and everyone's having fun, supposedly having fun. But you're looking at this and you're thinking, okay, so what does this mean? Where is this leading to? And yet I couldn't put it into words. I couldn't really say, because I didn't know about Islam at that time. I had nothing to compare with the life that I was living. All I knew was that I'm feeling deeply uncomfortable with the way I'm living. I was having bad dreams, insomnia, anorexia, everything. And I just couldn't. One of my recurring dreams was that it's dark, I'm sleeping, it's dark, I get up to put the light on, and I go to switch the light on, and the light doesn't switch on. It's like constantly trying to switch the light on, and the light doesn't go on. And I feel that, and I could be being incredibly judgmental, but when I think about how Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, he says, the one who remembers Allah is like a living tree among dead trees. And how I felt, and I looked back in a diary and I saw, again, just going about on the underground. And this is again before I discovered Islam, but I just felt there's a kind of, people aren't awake. I just felt that there's a kind of mental deadness. We're just going about our lives like this without being conscious of what we're doing. Another thing was, just feeling the artifice of everything. A lot of my friends were very into kind of the whole Buddhist Hindu thing. But for me, I could never really... It's something that I never, again, connected with very deeply. I sort of played around with it in a kind of a superficial way because that's what, the kind of environment I was in. But I never really connected with it deeply. From the age of 10, I learned to eat with chopsticks. My mother bought me a kimono. I started to buy books on teach yourself Japanese, and I started to try to teach myself. When I was 14, I found out, okay, what qualifications do I need to get in order to go to university? And and so it continued all the way up, and it still is there, really. It's my first love. So that was School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and I studied literature as well, so it would be the No plays of the 10th century, which I particularly loved. One of my short stories is based on one of my favourite No plays. 19th century literature, kabuki, theatre, and so we went out to Japan for a few months. All of us went out as students. They actually arranged for us to stay in a city that is a very modern city, Sapporo in the north. It's only about 100 years old. So it's like, you send us all the way over to Japan, to a city that has no history. So I found that frustrating as well. Japan is still obviously very proud of its culture, but I feel, again, just looking at it, it's lost a lot. I feel it's lost a lot. Everyone has admired Japan because of its economic advances and the long hours that people work, very disciplined worked culture. But it's become, again, similar to any other industrial country where the spirituality's been lost. I stayed with a family. I got on very well with my homestay mother. We became very good friends, and because again she was more into kind of classical aspects of culture. She was a housewife, so her husband worked in advertising, he would be out, and then she would be kind of, we would be going to museums together, and she didn't really know that much English. We did go to visit like a Buddhist temple, but again I just felt this is so superficial. It's not going into the depth of it. Like we practiced some Zen meditation for a while, but again there's no kind of context for it. There's no kind of ethical basis to it. It's just you go in, you meditate, you leave. And to me that just wasn't enough. I just felt like actually very happy to be to be travelling, flying over the South China Sea, looking at the islands down below, turning up at the airport. On the way back from Japan, that's when I went to Malaysia, and that was where I first discovered Islam. I said, okay, I want the most authentic, part of the country. I don't want to go to a commercialised area or tourist area. I want to go to the real Malaysia. So I got a taxi up from Kuala Lumpur to a place called Kuala Lipis in the middle of the country. That was beautiful, travelling through the countryside. And then in Kuala Lipis, when the train came, I met these Dutch people. We went up to Kota Baru and in the northeast. There they don't wear abaya, they wear sarong. Yeah. And so I bought some sarongs, which, in fact, that sarong right there on the floor is from that time that I bought it. I've got another one. They've lasted 20 years. It struck me the difference between a highly industrialised country that has lost its kind of spiritual underpinnings with a country that still is kind of living according to some kind of ethical, spiritual kind of code. So I just felt the difference immediately, and I felt much more comfortable in Malaysia. The owner of the guest house felt it was his duty to teach me how to pray. He took me to the mosque for Fajr prayer. I didn't go in, but he just took me to watch, because the sides of the masjid, the walls are open. Even though it was a short time, I just had a little feeling of feeling comfortable in a way that I hadn't felt comfortable for a long time. And then went back to the UK, carried on as normal, it wasn't like I had this kind of huge flash of inspiration. I went back as normal, but again, I was given a Quran by one Muslim, and then of course I moved in with this Moroccan lady when I was 21. She was only kind of a year and a half, 2 years older than me, and again, I needed somewhere quiet to study, so I moved in, but we didn't really mix much in the beginning because I was always with my door shut, studying. Our friendship grew quite slowly, in that gradually she said, "Oh, why don't we go out?" Okay, let's go out, and slowly. And she used to just mention little things about Islam. So she wasn't completely practicing, but yeah, she'd grown up, she'd gone to school, same kind of school that I'd gone to, and she was kind of starting to research her roots as well, going through a lot of kind of identity questioning as well. I think she was again on this search of kind of discovering. I think we both were, actually. That's what kind of, that was something that we were both engaged in terms of this kind of path of discovery. So we would go over there occasionally, and I would see her father pray, and they would share, like I would go over in the month of Ramadan, and I would have iftar with them, even though I hadn't been fasting.
The one that's on 4.
The usual. Well, my area of teaching is this is Hadith. That's the book I translated on the shelf. I forced them to buy. I had to do a course that would link the Japanese to the Islam. So I did comparative East Asian and African literature, East Asian, Chinese and Japanese, and then African as well. And while taking courses on African literature, that's where I learned about certain types of Islamic literature in West Africa, which not a lot of people know about. So, and then moving on to the PhD, I started to research, and I found out that there are some Ishraqi influences, in particularly one Fulani tale from Senegal. So I was researching the Ishraqi influences in this narrative, because Shahabuddin Suhrawardi was known in southern Spain, and there used to be a lot of trade between scholars and, between Spain and sub-Saharan Africa. So that's what it was about. For the Islamic studies, I teach Introduction to Islamic Mysticism, and then for Muslim cultures and civilizations, I teach social impact of Sufism on the Muslim world. MA, I teach distance learning, so that's via internet. It's a course as well for Islamic studies or comparative philosophy. So. $160,000 tomorrow. Good idea. 50,000 tomorrow. What I have discovered is that freedom without knowledge is, again, comes down to knowledge, and I think that's the same thing with having a nice middle-class way of life. That you can have a nice way of life, but if there's no knowledge behind it, it's pointless. So yes, I was free. I could go out when I wanted to go out, come home when I wanted to come home, go places I wanted to go, say what I like, do what I like. But I was really miserable. And it's a limited freedom, let's say. It's actually, people might think it's unlimited because you can do whatever you want. But it's actually quite limited because there's only so far you can go with freedom if you're not actually doing anything with that freedom. If all you're doing is just going out and having fun, okay, how much can you do that? After a while, these things that you're doing are going to just not taste very good, you know. They don't give that kind of satisfaction, let's say. And it's just this thing of like, something is not right, something is not right, and nobody around you actually understands what on earth you're talking about. So when I, began to discover, aha, here is this path, here is this way out. So for me, Islam was kind of like the door, that's opening a way out of this kind of... Again, I was just not satisfied with how my life was going. Although I had, as I said, a good job, I just needed time out to think about how I was going to live my life. I didn't really have any expectations. All I knew was that I need to get away to have a think. So that's what I did. I went. I didn't expect to stay in Egypt 6 months, but I just didn't want to come back. When you go into a place like that, first of all, you're coming from a culture that is very individualistic, quite cold. You go into a culture like that, people are more kind of alive, and I think that's again because of remembering a lot. When I came back from Egypt, I just felt that London was a dead city. It was generally this kind of underlying sense of kind of collectivity that kind of struck me. That, as well as the adhan, and of course I was there for the month of Ramadan, and you can hear the Quran going just before the adhan. And I just found that as well, recitation of Quran at night. I think you've got to have a heart of stone not to be affected by that. Even before I kind of consciously knew it, I started to say, I want to become Muslim. I researched for 2 years. I mean, I was praying and fasting before I took my shahada, and reading Quran and basically practicing before. But the reason I took so long is because I had heard stories of how people go into Islam very fast and then they leave very fast. So, and also it's thinking about changing your life. You don't know what is going to happen. You don't know how it's going to affect your life. You don't know if you're going to be able to live this way of life, to continue to live it. Even with the salah, I wasn't sure, how am I going to pray 5 times a day? So I was praying, but I wasn't wearing hijab at the time, and just continuing to practice really. And then eventually, 1999, I just went to the mosque and just said I want to become Muslim. It was more that I just couldn't tolerate not living properly as a Muslim anymore. I was taken to the office, and he said, "Why do you want to become Muslim?" And I just burst into tears. And so he said, "Okay." And then I just took my shahada there, and they signed the paper. My mum got very upset she thought I was going to become this person she doesn't recognise, and I'm going to abandon the family. And so I had to work very hard to kind of be in touch and show her that I'm not going, I'm not leaving, I'm here. And I think gradually over the years she's seen that there are similarities between, say, you know, the morals and ethics of Islam and her morals and ethics. So there are certain things we can agree on. And she's seen now, after 12 years, that I've got peace of mind with it. So I think this is why she's kind of come to accept.
So I was actually vegetarian for 10 years. From the age of 14 up to 24, I was vegetarian. When I became Muslim, I started to eat meat again, and it actually made things really complicated because my mum couldn't get her head around what is halal meat. So she would say, okay, I bought this organic chicken, it must be halal. I say, well, did they turn towards Mecca and say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, and then cut the neck? And she said, no. So, and it got really complicated. And in the end, I just said to her, I said, look, you know, just vegetarian is easier, just do vegetarian. Because when I was technically vegetarian, I still used to eat fish. So I just didn't eat meat. And so it's basically the same thing. And she's very gracious. If the family is having meat, she'll cook me a separate fish dish, which I don't ask for. I don't want her to go to the trouble, but that's what she wants to do.
When I was on Hajj, it was before I'd come to the path of Ahl Bayt. I could hear the recitations of the du'as of you know, Imam Hussein, Imam Zain al-Abidin from different tents on the day of Arafah. And for us, what do? You know, as a Sunni, you make dua, you run out of things to say, and you're trying to think of more things, and you know. So it was what I was observing is there's something missing, you know, there's something missing. It was incredible travelling across Arabia. You know, that's what struck me as well, that this message has come out of this place, this desert, these mountains. And that's when you realise it's a miracle as well. That, you know, you're driving through just empty plains, red and black mountains, exactly as it says in Quran, the different coloured mountains. But you think about how we were travelling by coach, again, how they would have travelled on foot, horse, camel, and how this message got out and is now global. I think just through my experiences, I mean, I have been to Sayyidah Zainab and now to Kadhimiya, Samara, Karbala, up to Mashhad. And I think, again, owing to certain experiences, I have felt a very close connection to Imam Rida, alayhi salam. Going to Karbala is a very different experience from going to Mashhad. And I think, obviously, because of what happened. With Mashhad, it's this kind of soft light that kind of envelopes you. With Karbala, it's a very, very intense light that just... And it just absolutely cuts through truth and falsehood. I would like to. I mean, I dream of kind of being settled, you know. I was thinking maybe when I'm an old lady, I will go and live in Mashhad. But who knows where I will end up. Yeah, I dream of kind of, you know, having a garden. But I don't feel at home in England, so I wouldn't feel at home if I had a garden here. I'm waiting for the day, maybe it will never come, the day when I finally find my home. Don't worry about it. No? Okay.
این زندگی کوتاهه و ما باید فکر میکنیم درباره آینده ما و از درس های اهل بیت ما باید آنها را حفظ کنیم. اگر شما آزادی داشته باشی ولی علم نداشته باشی، هنوز جهان مثل زندانه.